Hello everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to learn English with the incredible story of Steve Jobs. Before we start, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories. You'll learn how his greatest failure, getting fired from his own company, became the key to his success, while also picking up new words and phrases. Let's begin. Imagine this. You get fired from the company you built in a garage. The colleagues you considered friends vote against you. The world watches as you lose everything you've spent decades building. For most, this would be the end of a career. But for Steve Jobs, it was just the beginning of his greatness. Stay with us to discover how this devastating defeat transformed him into a titan who returned to build one of the world's most valuable companies. The story of Steve Jobs began not in Silicon Valley, but in a mundane life filled with searching and non-standard thinking. Being adopted as a child gave him the feeling that he was special, that his destiny was not defined by ordinary circumstances. This feeling was deeply rooted in him, fueling his pursuit of perfection. His father, a mechanic, instilled in him a love for details, teaching him that even internal, hidden elements must be perfectly executed, even if no one will see them. School could not hold Jobs' attention. His mind was too active for a standard education. He sought knowledge outside the classroom, delving into philosophy, Eastern practices, and the counterculture movement of the 60s. It was this peculiar combination of technical interest and artistic vision that would become his greatest asset in the future. He was one of a kind, an engineer who thought like an artist. His friendship with Steve Wozniak, formed in their school years, was fateful. Wozniak was a brilliant hands-on engineer who could turn any idea into a working prototype. Jobs, in turn, was a visionary who saw the potential of technologies that went beyond simple engineering. Their synergy was perfect. Wozniak created, and Jobs turned it into a commercial product that conquered the world. In 1976, in Jobs' parents' garage, they officially founded Apple Computer. Their first development was the Apple I, a simple but functional computer that they assembled by hand. Jobs was obsessed with the idea that a personal computer should not just be a tool for technicians, but should be accessible to everyone. He wanted computers in every home. He turned the garage into a real workshop where they assembled and tested every single detail. They sold the first 50 computers to a local store, which gave them the momentum for further development. This first step was extremely important. It proved that the combination of Jobs' vision and Wozniak's engineering genius could turn a dream into reality. The next project, the Apple II, was a true breakthrough. Jobs insisted that the computer have not only powerful features, but also an attractive design. He chose a brightly colored case that set it apart from the gray, monotonous competitors. This move showed his fundamental belief that design and aesthetics are no less important than functionality. The Apple II became not just a commercial success, but a cultural phenomenon. It made personal computers accessible to the mass market. Jobs achieved his goal. An Apple computer quickly transformed from a startup into a serious player that attracted the attention of investors and journalists. In 1980, Apple Computer went public, and this event became one of the most magnificent in financial history. The company's stock soared, turning Jobs and his team into millionaires overnight. He was the embodiment of a dream, young, rebellious, and incredibly successful. Jobs, who was only 25 at the time, became an icon of innovation. He was on magazine covers, and he was called a genius. Everyone wanted to be like him, to work for him. He created a company that was not just a business, but a movement that was changing the world. Jobs was obsessed with the idea of creating a computer for the people, a machine that would be intuitively understandable. This was the Macintosh project. He assembled a team of talented but eccentric engineers and completely isolated them from the rest of the company, creating an atmosphere of pirates. He was harsh, demanding, and often bullied his subordinates if they did not meet his high standards. His reality distortion field philosophy forced the team to achieve the impossible. Jobs believed he could convince anyone that they were capable of doing something impossible, and it worked. The launch of the Macintosh in 1984 became a legendary event. Jobs presented the computer on stage, delivering a speech that was more a show than a presentation. He introduced the Macintosh as a liberator from monotony, from the big brother IBM. He was on top of the world, convinced that he had created a product that would change humanity. The Macintosh was innovative, but it was not a commercial success, which was the beginning of the end. Its high price and limited software made it inaccessible to the mass market. This led to serious conflicts within the company, especially between the Macintosh team and the team that was developing the more successful Apple II. Jobs was uncontrollable. He refused to listen to criticism and rejected proposals for a change in strategy. His ruthless management style created a tense atmosphere that alienated many key employees. He was a genius, but his ego and inflexibility turned him into the main threat to the company itself. In desperation, the board of directors decided that something had to be done. They called in John Sculley, whom Jobs himself had hired as CEO, to help run the company. At first, they were allies, but their relationship soon became extremely tense, turning into open hostility. The conflict culminated when Jobs, behind Sculley's back, tried to seize control of the Macintosh project. Sculley found out and, realizing he could not work with Jobs, gave the board of directors an ultimatum: either Jobs or him. In 1985, Apple's board of directors gathered for a secret meeting to decide Jobs' fate. They knew it would be an incredibly difficult decision, but they were forced to choose between the brilliant but uncontrollable founder and the company's stability. The vote was almost unanimous. They supported Sculley. The news of Jobs' firing was a devastating blow. He left the office, feeling betrayed and humiliated. This defeat was much more painful than any other, as it was not just a business failure, but a personal betrayal from people he considered family. He could not believe they had betrayed him. At that moment, he believed his career was over. Getting fired from Apple was the deepest injury and the greatest defeat of his life. The whole world watched as the Titan fell, and journalists wrote articles about his arrogance and inability to work in a team. This was the moment when his greatness was called into question. After being fired, Steve Jobs went through one of the most difficult periods of his life. He was humiliated and broken. He spent his days wandering aimlessly, trying to figure out who he was now without Apple. Jobs, who had been identified with the company he founded, suddenly became a nobody. This defeat forced him to think about his life. Everything he had known was destroyed. He was forced to look for new ways to realize his creative potential. This period of solitude and reflection became a catalyst for his personal growth. He could no longer rely solely on his genius. Soon after, he founded a new computer company, Next. He was obsessed with the idea of creating a computer that would be perfect, and it cost him dearly. The Next computer was too expensive for the mass market. Jobs repeated the same mistake as with the Macintosh, but he did not realize it. Despite this, he was focused on quality. Next was not a commercial success, but its technologies, particularly the operating system, were incredibly innovative. This operating system would later become the basis for Mac OS X, which was his great victory. In 1986, Jobs bought a small animation studio that would later become Pixar. His idea was to create three-dimensional graphics for animation. He invested huge sums of money into it. For almost a decade, the studio did not make a profit, and Jobs was on the verge of shutting it down. In 1995, Toy Story was released, and it changed everything. The animated film became a phenomenon, bringing Jobs a huge profit. The success of Pixar taught him patience and strategic thinking, which he had lacked so much at Apple. At the same time that Jobs was rebuilding himself, Apple was in crisis. The company was on the verge of bankruptcy. In 1996, in a desperate attempt to save itself, Apple acquired Next. This allowed Jobs to return to the company he had once founded. At first, he was just a consultant, but his influence grew quickly. He began a reorganization, canceling hundreds of projects that he considered hopeless. He was ruthless in his desire to save Apple, and it worked. In 1997, he became the interim CEO. He did what he had to do. He once again made Apple a company that created products that were more than just technologies. He revived their identity. In 1998, Jobs introduced the iMac. It was a bright, colorful computer that was completely different from the gray mass of PCs. The iMac became a commercial success. It was not just a product, but a symbol of rebirth. It showed the whole world that Apple was back. After the success of the iMac, Jobs went further. He saw that the music industry needed a revolution. In 2001, Apple introduced the iPod, a simple but powerful music player. It was perfect. Along with the iPod, Jobs launched the iTunes Store, which allowed people to buy music in digital format, which was the beginning of the end of the CD era. He was one step ahead of everyone, turning the music industry into his own ecosystem. In 2007, Jobs introduced the iPhone, which became his greatest creation. The iPhone was not just a phone, but a revolutionary device that combined a phone, a player, and an internet communicator. It was a perfect product. Its presentation was one of the most legendary in technology history. He stood on stage, confident that he was creating a product that would change the world, and he was not wrong. The iPhone became a cultural phenomenon that changed the way we live and interact. Jobs did not stop. He launched the iPad, which created a new market for tablet computers. He was obsessed with the idea that Apple should dominate the market, and he achieved his goal. Everything he did was filled with his philosophy, to create products that would be intuitively understandable, perfect from the inside out, and that would change the world. He was on top of the world, convinced that his vision had no limits. The final years of Jobs' life were tragic. He fought a disease, but did not stop. His last presentations were filled with strength and wisdom, and his words about life and death changed millions. He was a genius who fought to the end. His legacy is not just technology, but his philosophy. To be obsessed with an idea, not to be afraid to go against the rules, to seek perfection, and never to stop, even when the world says you should give up. The greatest lesson from Jobs is not in his successes, but in his greatest defeat, being fired from Apple. This defeat taught him patience, strategic thinking, and, most importantly, it showed him that his identity was not tied to the company, but to his vision. The firing gave him time for personal growth, for making mistakes, and for creating new companies. He became a better leader who was no longer obsessed with control, but was focused on ideas. He returned to Apple not as a founder, but as a savior, which was his greatest victory. Steve Jobs is a story about how the greatest defeat can become the greatest lesson that leads to greatness. He was a genius, but his greatness was forged not by his triumphs, but by his defeats. Steve Jobs' story is a powerful reminder that failure is not the opposite of success. It is a fundamental part of it. His greatest defeat taught him his most valuable lessons and forged his legendary comeback. Now we want to hear from you. Which part of Steve Jobs' journey inspired you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video and learned something new, please like it and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that help you learn English. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.